Hey, so it's no secret that I've been very opinionated and shooting a lot of beliefs out there on my Facebook lately. And I think it's only fair that I explain and kind of back up where I'm coming from. Not saying anything I'm saying is proven fact, truth, or anything like that. I do go off a lot of basis of faith. And opinion and belief. So everything I'm posting is not intended to be, I know more than anybody, I know better than anybody, but I'm just trying to share with what I feel has worked with me as an individual and some of the things that really make sense to me. So I'm going to try to break some things down through videos I found kind of that help me form my opinions and just kind of highlight where I made a connection or a light bulb, moment or anything like that. So I know it's going to probably be quite messy and not as organized or processed in the beginning. But I think if I go ahead and continue with trying to get these basically statement videos made, maybe I'll get better at composing them. So we'll see how it goes. But let's see. So, but feel free to comment. I'm not trying to really debate anything with anyone, but I definitely will discuss, opposing theories and thoughts. So we'll see how it goes. So we'll see. Here we go. I'm going to start this now. All right, I got my Able cat in here and he's screaming, so please forgive that. But basically what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to pull videos up with my tablet and record some of the moments that I feel like speak a lot. And I will just basically record them onto my phone from my tablet. So it's going to be pretty crude. I don't have like a great functioning computer that I can, properly do this. So that's all I'm going to do is basically commentary to videos I've seen and maybe mention how it reminds me of other linking thoughts and just kind of where I'm coming from with my critical thinking, I guess we can call it. So yeah, that's basically what I'm thinking is gonna go down. I'm gonna get Abel out of my room so he stops screaming. But we'll see how it goes. All right, so it looks like I'm gonna have the help of Stormy Cat. He's being very pushy. So anyways, this first video basically is a short one that introduce the idea and the theories that are being made out there in the scientific population of the possibility of a simulated reality, a Matrix style existence. So, I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but even the most brilliant men are out there thinking of it and looking into it. So, hear it out. It's pretty interesting. Right, Storm? All that great stuff, whatever.
Achievement in which we can describe everything that we know of particles, in terms of 12 particles, and that's just beautiful. However, it's not a pure unification in the spirit that, say, superstring theory would like it to be, because each one of the forces, electromagnetism, strong, and the weak interactions, keep their imprint in the theory. And what we really want in the so-called grand unified theory or gut theory is that these three things become one. And the standard model certainly does not do that. It's really bringing them together in a sort of a patchwork way. And that is, in fact, one of the reasons why we want to go beyond that. That's one of the motivations for string theory.
Jim, have you gone beyond that?
Brian is...
Well, it's been very interesting sitting on the stage and listening to my colleagues. And I am far from experimental physicists, as you can imagine. But this is why experimental...
Which means you're a theorist.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Something like that.
Yeah, okay. It's code for I'm a theorist.
I'm a theorist, exactly. But my point is that it is always the case that it is our experimental colleagues that prevent us from forming a religion. because it is always grounded in what they can measure, as Marcello keeps coming back to. And so, although people can express either enthusiasm or dismay about where we are at a given point in time, I think that we need to be a little bit more humble and to understand that the process that we engage in is a constant flight from fantasy about what we would want to happen, and we query nature for that, and that query goes through experiment. So although this has probably been very entertaining for my audience here, I think that at the end of the day, we have to keep grounded in it's got to be about things that affect your lives, and those things are measurable things.
So where has this pursuit taken you?
Oh my God.
Where have you landed?
Why would you ask that?
I'm asking you that here and now. It's New York City. It's March 7th.
Well, partly it's taken to these very strange images that are behind your head right now. These are pictures of equations. I've been, for the last 15 years, trying to answer the kinds of questions that my colleagues here have been raising. And what I've come to understand is that there are these incredible pictures that contain all the information of a set of equations that are related to string theory. And it's even more bizarre than that, because when you then try to understand these pictures, you find out that buried in them are computer codes, just like the type that you find in a browser when you go surf the web. And so I'm left with the puzzle of trying to figure out whether I live in the Matrix or not.
Wait, you're blowing my mind at this moment. So are you saying your attempt to understand the fundamental operations of nature leads you to a set of equations that are indistinguishable from the equations that drive search engines and browsers on our computers?
That is correct. So,
Wait, I have to just be silent for a minute here. So you're saying as you dig deeper, you find computer code writ in the fabric of the cosmos?
into the equations that we want to use to describe the cosmos, yes.
Computer code.
Computer code, strings of bits of ones and zeros.
It's not just sort of resembles computer code, you're saying it is computer code.
It's not even just is computer code, it's a special kind of computer code that was invented by a scientist named Claude Shannon in the 1940s. That's what we find very, very deeply inside the equations that occur in string theory and in general in systems that we say are supersymmetric.
Okay.
Time to go home, I think. Where are we going to go? So are you saying we're all just, there's some entity that programmed the universe and we're just expressions of their code?
Well, I didn't say that. Some of those
Like the Matrix? That's what you said.
Some of those codes are showing on the screen behind you right now. They don't look like codes, but these pictures, which we call adinkras, are graphical representations of sets of equations that are based on codes. So this is, in fact, to answer your question more directly, I have in my life come to a very strange place because I never expected that the movie The Matrix might be an accurate representation of the place in which I live.
Jim, may I give you an argument that we don't live in the Matrix?
Please. Yeah.
Very simple argument.
Give me one now, quick.
A very simple argument. There's a property that the real world right down here has that no mathematical equation has, that no solution of an equation has, that no abstract object has. Here in the real world, it is always some moment, which is one of a series of passing moments. And a mathematical equation doesn't have a flow of time in it. It just is.
No,
and this means...
But Lee...
Wait, let him finish. Wait, I need him here and now.
This means that, to me, that the ancient metaphysical fantasy that we quote are just mathematics cannot be true, because in a world that was just mathematics, there would be no moment of time.
Why isn't there
Lee,
math as a function of time?
I'm sorry.
We solve those. These are differential equations.
But,
Lee,
then you lay the solution out.
Lee,
X is a... Yeah.
You're mistaking. You keep using the word is, and I'm talking about the word describe. You see,
But
the whole...
described is fine. But
But
then we're
let
not
me
in the
finish,
matrix.
please, since we started with my discussion. The point is that it's fun to talk about some deep metaphysical essence that sits behind physics. But for some of us, It's about trying to find the most accurate way to describe where we live. And so my statement is that in the description of our universe, that is a supersymmetrical universe, which we were going to test in the LHC. If you believe that description, I can show you the presence of these codes. That's my statement.
That's beautiful, and that's fine, and I admire that. That seriously, that's fine. That's another beautiful
So then
piece of
shut
mathematics
up.
that may be explanatory or descriptive of physics, but that all I'm objecting to is that doesn't mean that we live in the mathematics. That means the mathematics is just descriptive of an aspect of the universe, and
Well, that's a
we're
good
not
point.
in
Let me
the
follow that
matrix.
one up. Jim, just because, who was it? Eugene Brigner, who commented on the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics that we just invent in our head, yet the universe follows, can be described mathematically. Mathematics is the language of the universe. Brian, math gets it. Math is your tool. So should we be amazed or depressed by what Jim tells us here?
I can't really comment on what Jim says. I found myself in the unusual position of feeling rather conservative on a panel, and usually I'm sort of at the outside.
And by the way, the pictures Jim showed all look like spirograph
Yeah,
images
I saw them.
from your kids'
I don't
thing.
know enough about them to comment, but there is an interesting question, the one that you raised, about whether math is descriptive of the universe, or we are the math, or what's the role of math? You discover it is invented. I mean, I had a conversation, and I think you may have been involved in it, if not mistaken. The question was, is math the right way of going about trying to find deep physical law? And I said, look, I can imagine one day we'll encounter aliens, and they'll say to us, okay, show us what you've got to describe the universe. We break out our mathematics, and they look at it and they say, oh, Matt, we used to do that. Ultimately, a dead end, and then they show us what they have found. Now, the problem with that is I don't actually even know what I would fill in regarding what they would show us, because to me, mathematics is really the language of pattern. It's self-consistent ways of embodying pattern, and that's ultimately what we do. We're pattern recognition machines. We try to codify the patterns we see in the world around us in math, and in that way, we try to describe the universe around us. Does that mean we are the mathematics? I don't know. It becomes really hard to really know exactly what that means, but we have found that math so far is a potent tool for making predictions that we can test and confirm, and that's why I follow this particular trajectory.
Brian, we're going to have to very shortly go to questions from the audience, but I want to come back at you with a couple of questions that are sort of purposefully blunt. Okay?
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so basically in this video, it's this lady, everything she makes is like my favorite. So anyways, I'm going to play this video from beginning to end because she cram packs a lot in there, and I think it's all worthy to at least be heard out. Agree or disagree, it's still legit content. So this is a video from one of my favorite YouTubers. I don't even know the lady's name, but her channel is called The Supernatural. And I think it's just called Supernatural. It may have more to it. But anyways, I just love everything she says. Never find a disagreement. She's taught me so much. It's just so much. So I'm just going to play straight from her video. I don't know how it's going to go with copyrights and stuff like that. But either way, if I get stuff taken down, I get it taken down. Here it goes, though.
Absolutely shocking part is that I would ever agree with Neil deGrasse Tyson on anything, but I do on this, mostly. And this is about the simulation theory. Finally, in our lifetime, we are actually reaching a point where scientists and physicists and biologists and technologists are discussing openly disregarding the theory of evolution and moving into the simulation hypothesis, which is a little bit like the Matrix and a little bit like the Sims video games. In modern times, I would have to say that Nick Bostrom is sort of the father of the simulation hypothesis back in the 90s. But of course, it did start, talk of this sort of thing did start forever ago. Rene Descartes back in the late 1500s, early 1600s, was talking about this. Of course, he wasn't talking in terms of computers and everything like Nick Bostrom was, because, you know, back in the 90s, computers were just taking off and this whole Matrix thing and all of that. So I would say it has been something in our souls, in our DNA, in our subconscious from the beginning of time. But as far as structuring that in terms that people can receive and understand, I would have to say that started again about in the 90s. But it still wasn't taken seriously. Still, people were buying into this silly, primitive, barbaric theory of evolution.
Many scientists are so excited about this idea of simulation because it gives them a welcome escape from having to defend the implausible claims of Darwinian evolution. Dr. Rich Terrell is a NASA scientist who says that we might be living in a simulation is a simpler explanation for our existence than the idea that we're the first generation to rise up from a primordial ooze and evolve into molecules, biology, and eventually intelligence and self-awareness. In other words, the whole evolution thing seems a bit far-fetched. It looks like we're living in some kind of designed reality. That seems to be the case here. Terrell even says that a designed world would help us to explain some unresolved problems in quantum mechanics. So they're getting so close to the truth here. They're getting so close.
So we've come a long way since Nick Bostrom was theorizing all of this back in the 90s. And now we have very real, tangible movements toward that. Not just artificial intelligence, but we're well into the transhumanist movement and biohacking. And things like neural implants are on the way. So I'm going to play a clip from Elon Musk right now about this simulation theory and whether he believes that that's a plausible theory for this reality that we're in. So try to keep in mind, when we're talking about computers and that type of thing, we're talking at this point about chips, computer chips, and quantum computers. We have quantum computers that are literally reaching into other dimensions right now. That's a fact. You can go to my science and technology playlist and you can see the clips of them showing those technologies and talking about them. And then on top of the quantum computers, we have the neural implants. So you would have the chips actually in your brain. So when we're talking virtual reality, we're not talking about things like wearing these big clumsy glasses over your eyes. No, we're talking about virtual reality. We're talking about a reality that will be beamed right into the circuits of your brain. Okay, so here's the next clip.
So the idea is, right, any sufficiently advanced civilization could create a simulation that's like our existence. And so the theory follows that maybe we're in the simulation. Have you thought about this? And
a lot.
And
I mean, like the strongest argument for us being in a simulation, probably being in a simulation, I think is the following. That 40 years ago, we had Pong, like two rectangles and a dot. That was what games were. Now, 40 years later, we have photorealistic 3D simulations with millions of people playing simultaneously, and it's getting better every year. And soon we'll have virtual reality, augmented reality. If you assume any rate of improvement at all, then the games will become indistinguishable from reality, just indistinguishable. Even if that rate of advancement drops by 1,000 from what it is right now, then you just say, okay, well, let's imagine it's 10,000 years in the future, which is nothing in the evolutionary scale. So given that we're clearly on a trajectory to have games that are indistinguishable from reality, and those games could be played on any set-top box or on a PC or whatever, and there would probably be, billions of such, computers or set-top boxes, it would seem to follow that the odds that we're in base reality is 1 in billions.
so
Tell me what's wrong with that argument.
is the answer yes?
The argument is probably, I mean, it's like, is there a flaw in that argument?
I mean, someone.
I'm not sure what the error.
No, the argument makes sense. So the assumption then is that somebody beat us to it, and this is a game.
No, there's a 1 in billions chance that this is base reality.
All right, God, is it? It's time for some answers. Who are we?
Here's the bad news. You're video game characters. You were designed by computer geeks in cubicles to run around and be controlled by other computer geeks in their bedrooms.
We knew that, Birkenstocks. Yeah, explain to us the meaning of life.
Okay, those computer geeks who control you, thing is, they're part of a video game too. You see, the planet Earth is my most immersive, detailed video game yet, and I play it 24 hours a day.
Like Mr. Musk thinks, are we living in simulation?
I find it hard to argue against that possibility.
Meaning?
Meaning, you look at our computing power today, and you say, I have the power to program a world inside of a computer. Well, imagine in the future where you have even more power than that, and you can create characters that have, for example, free will, or their own perception of free will. So this is a world, and I program in the laws that govern that world. That world will have its own laws of physics and chemistry and biology. Now, you're a character in that world, and you think you have free will, and you say, I want to invent a computer. So you do. Hey, I want to create a world in my computer. And then that world creates a world in its computer. And then you have simulations all the way down. So now you lay out all these universes and throw a dart. Which of these universes are you most likely to hit? The original one that started it, or the countless simulations, the daughter simulations that unfolded thereafter? You're going to hit one of the simulations. So statistically, based on that argument, which first appeared by a philosopher from Oxford named Nick Bostrom back in the 1990s, right when computers were becoming real enough to think this through, it's hard to argue against the possibility that all of us are not just the creation of some kid in a parent's basement programming up a world.
The idea that we're living within a created universe and that the laws of physics have been programmed in by a creator outside of that universe is, of course, something the Bible's been saying for thousands and thousands of years. So it's really interesting that secular scientists are now starting to turn in that direction. Of course, what's silly from the secular position is that they're still not willing to invoke God as the creator. I mean, think about this for a second. Okay, Neil deGrasse Tyson, this universe was created by Almighty God. What? No, that's silly. Hey, Neil deGrasse Tyson, this universe was created by a 10-year-old kid in his parents' basement. Oh yeah, that could definitely be true. It's hard to argue against that.
I find it hard to argue against that possibility.
The audacity. It's just, I mean, it would be comical if it wasn't so profoundly serious that they can believe that all of the laws of physics and the laws of celestial mechanics and all of this could be created and intelligently designed by some 10-year-old in a basement somewhere, and we could be living in that created world. But they refuse to acknowledge God. But they're atheists. They can conceive of it, of creation and all that, but they refuse to acknowledge the Creator. He just said, they all just said out of their own mouth, they believe the world could be created. And the very same people say, no, we refuse to admit there's a creator. That's laughable. A God is laughable. No, what's laughable is your hypocrisy, is the way that you contradict yourself, the way that you will twist things completely into insanity other than bow your knee to the supreme being, the creator of the universe, God. And you know why that is? My guess of why that is, because they're willing to submit to the laws of physics, but they aren't willing to submit to the moral laws, the moral authority of God. It's that whole silly Anton LaVey styled Satanism, do as thou wilt, right? So they can admit that these laws could be put into place by a creator, but they won't submit to the moral laws. It's easier for them to stay in denial or to rationalize that the creator is a 10-year-old kid, because they can be accountable, or they don't have to be accountable to a 10-year-old kid, right? That's just doing this for entertainment. But the very concept that they might be accountable to a creator that's not a 10-year-old kid, but maybe a creator who is holy, a creator that set forth laws, moral laws, laws that defined what holy matrimony is, laws that defined marriage for us, laws that defined right and wrong. What if that creator isn't a 10-year-old kid in somebody's basement? What if the creator is holy? And what if the laws that he set forth, the moral laws, are real, just as real as the laws of physics? Then what? So to me, that's the lunacy of the whole thing, or the hypocrisy, or that they're disingenuous. Because they can believe, they can conceive of it. They talk about it. They can conceive of creation. They can conceive of a simulated reality. And no matter how you cut it, it's terminology. We are saying the same thing. Creation, creationism, creation equals intelligent design equals simulation theory. It's the same thing. It's creation. It's a created biosphere. It's a created world. So even though all of those scientists are saying it, all of the modern scientists are saying it, the hypocrisy is at the very same time, the Supreme Court is passing legislation, and they're not the legislative branch. That's the second absurdity of the whole checks and balances system we're supposed to have, that the courts enforce the law. They're not supposed to make law. But anyway, they banned teaching intelligent design in schools. They completely stifled the brains and education of our children for decades. So not only in 1987, here it is, in a 7-2 vote, the justices said that the law mandating creation science instruction violated the legal principle of separation of church and state. So although we can see now that creationism, intelligent design, simulation theory is not at all a religious theory, it's just because the Bible has told the truth, has been telling us this for millennia, that we were living in a created environment and we were created beings ourselves. Just because the Bible is right, that doesn't make everything recorded in those ancient texts a religion. How were we so easily duped? Have we forgotten what the Bible is? It is a collection of archaeological finds. These are texts, historical records left by our ancestors from thousands and thousands of years ago. Some of the most important archaeological finds, and that's why it's called the Bible. The word Bible means the book, because they were bound together as the authoritative record of world history and human origins. And this is what they told us. It wasn't a religion. It's a collection of anywhere from like 65, 66 ancient texts to as many as 72 or more ancient texts bound together. They are all by different authors, by dozens and dozens of different authors throughout all eras of world history. Some of them are, a little less than 2,000 years old, like around 100 AD to 160 AD, so a couple thousand years ago. Some of them in the Old Testament, are more like 4,000 years old, several millennia old. These are archaeological finds left by our ancestors, and they tell us exactly what the scientists are saying now, that this world is an intelligent design. It's created. So just because the Bible is way ahead of the scientists and always has been, scientists are just now catching up to what the Bible's been saying, that doesn't make it a religion. It's still a collection of archaeological finds of historic records left by our ancestors. The only reason we call it a religion is because religions have sprung out from it, and because of the mainstream propaganda, because of the deep state, because of the mystery schools and how they have taught us and twisted and twisted and twisted reality to the point that most kids today don't even know that the Bible is a collection of archaeological finds written by dozens of authors throughout all eras of human history. They have no idea. They probably think one person wrote it, like Buddha or something. They probably have no idea what the Bible even is. And I guarantee that about 90% of them have, and maybe even more, that might be a conservative estimate, have never read it. I mean, I'd venture to say most Christians haven't even read it. So here's the case in question, McLean v. Arkansas Board of Education. And it was a 1981 law just saying, it wasn't saying teach creation and ban evolution like they're always saying. No, all it said is that public schools within the state shall give balanced treatment to creation science and to evolution science. So it was saying the science of both. And there is great science. There is amazing science, just like in the simulation theory. But there's on a cellular level, there's amazing scientific evidence for creation, that things had to come to be instantaneously, that like certain parts of the cell that produce proteins that control a different part of the cell that creates another protein that goes back and causes the first part to cause the production of the first protein. So they're codependent. One could not have come before the other. One could not have evolved after the other. Both of those parts of the cell had to instantly come to be at the same time, or else the other part would die. They are codependent on one another. Tons of things like that. Tons of science, but it can't be taught because they use this fake, separation of church and state. And if you've ever read the Constitution, folks, the words separation of church and state are not even in there. That was something taken out of a personal letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote, and they twisted the context. The context was that the state should not interfere with religion. That's what separation of church and state was that the government could not forbid us teaching and practicing and discussing and expressing freedom of religion. But the irony that for decades, that was back in the 80s, Christians were fighting, saying, no, we need to teach intelligent design science. It was actually in the legislation. We wanted to teach creation science, the science part of it. They didn't want to, open up the Bible and have a Bible study. They just wanted to discuss what we're discussing right here. Simulation theory, an intelligent design, things like that. So now after they've dumbed our children down for decades and decades. I mean, this is almost 1981. That's almost 40 years. 40 years that they've kept our children in the dark. And now they send these guys out. Now they send their deep state operatives out to say, oh, and by the way, we believe in intelligent design because we're so smart. Well, you guys have been telling us that we're so uneducated that you had to ban the theory of intelligent design and forbid our children from ever learning about it in your indoctrination systems. And now, after 40 years of suppression and censorship, you're coming out saying, well, yeah, look how smart we are. We think that is the most probable explanation. Well, thanks a lot, Sherlock Holmes. Aren't you the smartest guy in the room?
Of course, again, the Bible's been saying it all along, that this universe has a designer, has a creator, if you want to put it in these terms, even a programmer, and that there's a larger reality outside of this universe. The only problem is that they're so blinded by their internal resistance to God, and they're so keen to not be morally constrained by what God's existence would mean, that they'd rather put the creation down to a 10-year-old kid on a computer in his parents' basement than God himself. That seems more plausible to them, or at least less troubling to their conscience, is perhaps nearest to the truth.
And I've been talking about this for years. I've made tons of videos trying to relate to people, to speak in their own language, because they have us so divided. It's not just black against white, and now men against women, and Republican against Democrat. They've divided us every way possible, and science against religion is one of those ways. So they act like we're saying two different things when we're saying the same thing. We might use different terms. We might say spiritual realms, you might say dimensions, we might say creationism, you might say simulation theory, but the concepts are the same. It's just they've done such a thorough job of dividing us and pitting us against one another. And so that's one thing that I've talked about for a long time. And I've made several videos on it, saying, what does that mean if we are created beings? I mean, think about that. That's profound. If we are created beings, we are the original AI. We were created in God's image. And, what makes us different from a robot, other than we're not synthetic, we're a carbon-based entity, is the life, the spirit that is in us. And I've done quite a few videos on that. I won't go into it here. If you go onto my page, let me see, in technology and science, in that playlist, if you go through there, you'll see like AI, stuff on AI. Sophia the AI speaks on our future time travel. That's a pretty interesting one. This one's good, and it's only 8 minutes. Sophia the AI, the ex-Google engineer that says AI is the Godhead. Anyway, if you go into that playlist, you'll be able to find them. Just about any of the videos on AI, but there's a couple I did specifically. Here's one. It's the one with Elon Musk and the Terminator thumbnail. We are the original AI. Sophia is second generation as we create beings trying to self-replicate. And you can see here, number 2 also, that's the one on kymatics, where matter is moved by sound, which is why we have God as creator, and also the Word of God, the Son of God, is the creator. Again, just another example that the ancient texts that are in the Bible are literal and scientific. In John 1:1-3, it explains how both God and the Word of God are the creator, because it was the sound waves, it's the frequencies. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made, and without him nothing was made that has been made. So when it says God spoke the world into existence, that's how both God and the Word of God simultaneously created this world. Okay, and I want to close out with this last little clip, and this to me seems so related. This is actually part of a testimony from a Christian who came from the ayahuasca. If you know that, it's a drug in Peru that they use to have these psychedelic experiences to reach into other dimensions. And again, I've made lots of videos on that. This is a good one, DMT, trip experiences, and Flocka, caught on tape, zombie apocalypse. But it's more about pharmakia, which is the word that we often translate sorcery. In a lot of our Bibles, they translate it sorcery. But that word, the actual word in the transcripts, in the Holy Scriptures, is pharmakia or pharmakia. In most of our modern Bibles, the word is translated sorcery. So people kind of get the idea that it's about some sort of weird hocus pocus, or, somebody's wearing a big, like, Merlin wizard hat or something. But that's not at all what the actual word in the ancient scriptures is pharmakia, and we translate it sorcery. But it means using drugs to interact with the other dimensions, which are spiritual realms, but they're also dimensions, as in quantum physics and physics, they're dimensions. And because we have synapses in our brains that aren't connected, each different drug will act as a bridge. It's an extension cord. It plugs one end of the synapse into the other, and then you can have an altered state of consciousnness where you are conscious of more than just this octave of dimensions that we normally perceive with our 5 senses. So we call it sorcery, but it's using drugs to be able to perceive other dimensions. But the point here is the ayahuasca and her experience when she talks about, it's very reminiscent of what Neil deGrasse Tyson was saying about creating dimensions, and there would be simulations of simulations and simulations going on and on.
Now, you're a character in that world, and you think you have free will. And you say, I want to invent a computer. So you do. Hey, I want to create a world in my computer. And then that world creates a world in its computer. And then you have simulations all the way down.
And she speaks about on one of these drug trips when she was perceiving that. and what it really means to be a lost soul. I mean, that's terrifying. These words have meaning, and we've lost the meaning, so it all seems sort of esoteric and, religious, but it's not. And so she's going to describe what she saw and what it felt like to be a lost soul in these just stacked simulations of reality, and to be the terror of being untethered, and just the terror of what it must be like to be eternally lost. And she talks about, she reached out, she had to call on Jesus to save her, and she had the realization of who he was as creator and the one who held it all together. And outside of him, it was just lost in the nothingness of it. And, when the Bible specifically says that. It talks about souls being lost and being cast out into outer darkness for eternity. Like, these are profound concepts that, people say, oh, don't preach hell, no, you know what? People need to know. So anyway, I thought that her perception and her experience in these dimensions and being lost in this expanse was pertinent to this topic. So here's her clip.
To delve into the shamanic world of spirits and alternate realities.
So basically, this last video clip is a shorter clip of the video that actually popped it in my head to compile it with a few others that kind of made me think that, they're owning up to the fact that they can't discredit God. They can't take the fact away that there are multiple dimensions that we cannot, process. So that's kind of why I'm just tacking this one on at the end. I want to basically reinforce the idea or the thought or the fact, I guess, that the scientific community still doesn't know jack.
Multi-dimensional universe, what would be the dimensions we are unaware of?
Any dimension higher than the 3 that we're familiar with, or the actual 4 that we're embedded in. We live in a 4-dimensional world. And that might sound a little flaky or freaky, but consider the following fact. You have never met someone at a place unless it was also at a time. And you have never met someone at a time unless it was also at a place. That requires 4 dimensions of coordinates.
Wait. What about in a dream?
Is the dream happening inside your head?
Yes. I don't know when.
So the only point is, we know intuitively that we need 4 dimensions to localize someone to meet up with them. Especially when, only 2 dimensions if you don't have tall buildings. You have tall buildings, you need the 3rd dimension. So you don't say, I'll meet you at the 20th floor of, on 721 Park Avenue. What time? Okay? There's a full 4 dimensions going on there. So I want to convince you we live in a 4-dimensional world for that reason. Okay. It may be that these 4 dimensions are manifest to us, but that in fact we are embedded in a higher dimensional space. And string theorists on the frontier of this exercise are hypothesizing at least 10 dimensions to account for everything we see in the universe, even if we do not directly measure those dimensions themselves. Now, with your permission, may I go on a dimensional journey with you? May I? May I take you on a journey?
A dimensional odyssey.
Odyssey, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. Are we ready? Just get ready for this. Okay. So, I'm at my desk, and the desk is a surface, okay? And I start putting pages down on the desk. I'm tiling them on the desk. And then I run out of room. I've exhausted the 2 dimensions of the surface of my desk. We have ways of accommodating this problem. And so we have page organizers that go upwards. So now when I don't have any more surface area of the desk, I can enter a 3rd dimension and put pages there. If you are an ant embedded in this 2-dimensional world of the surface of my desk, and you fill up the desk with these sheets of paper, the ant will say, there is no more room. And I say, yes, there is, watch me. And I take a piece of paper off the desk, put it in the page organizer, and according to the ant that's embedded in the 2 dimensions, that page disappeared. It disappeared into a dimension that ant does not have access to. What a brilliant invention this is. You can put practically an unlimited number of pages, far more pages above the desk than on the desk. So access to a 3rd dimension is an extraordinarily useful storage device for a 2-dimensional creature.
Does the ant trust you that what it cannot see is nevertheless there?
You have to then talk to it about this extra dimension. And then it will have to just trust you.
Yes.
Because watch what happens next. I now have my 3-dimensional room, and I'm filling it with boxes. Now I've run out of space to put the boxes. But now a 4-dimensional alien looks at us and says, I got this. Just move it into the 4th dimension. What are you talking about? And the alien comes in, reaches in, takes one of the boxes, and then the box disappears. Disappears. It went into a 4th dimension. And this was captured in the film Monsters, Inc. Did you guys see this film? These are monsters that work in a door factory, and they make these doors, and they open the door, and it is the door of a kid's bedroom or their closet.
Okay, that's actually enough for today. I kind of can't wait to put these things together. I know the one video that is the main meat of what I'm trying to express is pretty long, so I will try to definitely keep my commentary pretty limited, and also the other attachment videos, well, they're shorter, but I'll try to clip them down too, so don't have like a whole 2-hour video popping on you guys. But regardless, whatever it ends up being, and I'm still gonna make it, I'm still gonna post it, and hopefully it can help people see kind of where I'm coming from to get to my conclusions. So here we go.